Roger, I am so thrilled to be with you this morning. Roger Hansen, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
You are a very special person to us. And one of those reasons is because you are a neighbor. You live in Sun City Anthem. You know a lot of us. We know you. You're a gentleman who has flown for years. You still fly. And we are standing next to a highly unique airplane. And the beautiful artistry on it had me come here today because I wanted you to be able to talk about this beauty. Would you do that for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
To start with, I need to give you a little bit of history. As any young kid growing up in the 1950s, I was enthralled about airplanes. You know, I built models, and later on I flew gas model airplanes, what they call U-control. And then into my teen years, I always had the desire to learn to fly. However, at that point in time in my life, I didn't have the money to do it. So then I got involved in cars and eventually went off to college and got a degree in automotive engineering and also a business degree. And I was getting ready to enlist in the Air Force because now I had an engineering degree. I already knew how to fly because I learned in college. And then my eyesight didn't meet the qualifications. So then I turned to the business world and traveled internationally for Alice Chalmers and on technical stuff. And then eventually I went to Toyota, where I spent almost 30 years in the business world. But all this time I had the love for flying. Originally I started an airplane in Hammond, Indiana, which is where I grew up, and transported a partially built airplane out to California, where I was working for Toyota, and completed that. And I'm just going to turn sideways here, and you'll see on the aircraft right here, it has what we call an N number. And my N number is November 200 Romeo Hotel. Well, that was the first airplane I built also, which unfortunately I totaled the airplane on a highway up in Oregon because of an exhaust system failure on it. So then I built the airplane you see right here, and it's a Vans RV6. And since you are the builder of this, you're permitted to do a lot of modifications on it. And while there are a number of RV6s flying, each one is unique to itself because everybody adds their own touches while they're doing it. It took 7.5 years to build, and I was working, 10-hour days, and then I spent late evenings working on it, weekends working on it, and completed it in 7.5 years. And I first flew it in August of 1998, so now I've flown it for 20 years. And it's been a great airplane. I've been all over the U.S., Mexico, Canada, Alaska, the Caribbean, and so I'm always looking for an adventure to go someplace. And next summer, I think we're going to head up to Nova Scotia. People ask me, well, why do you want to go to Nova Scotia? Because I've never been there. So that's as good a reason as any. So in the building process and everything, I knew I liked going long distance stuff. So a standard RV6 carries 38 gallons of gas. I hold 65. And I've flown nonstop from here to Houston, which is a 7-hour flight, and still had plenty of gas left. It's a two-place aircraft, and my wife has been with me on most of the trips. You may have noticed the paint job on this is a little bit different than the standard airplane you'd probably see. And there's a story behind that. I was taking the airplane on a trailer to a body shop to paint it. And on the trailer, the airplane, minus the wings, was put on it backwards. So in other words, the nose of the airplane was to the rear and the tail to the front. And I didn't have my canopy latched down. I forgot. And I got on the freeway, hit a bump, it bounced up, and it ripped the whole forward section of the airplane up. And I was just distraught over it after spending, 7.5 years building it. So then over the next month and a half, while I was repairing all that and redoing it, I happened to be driving down 14th Street in Hayward, California. And most airplanes you see, they have some version of stripes on them. And my first airplane was that way, and I was going to paint it very similar to that. And all of a sudden, I saw on the side of a building, somebody had put a graffiti of a dragon on it. I said, that's what I got to put on the airplane. Because, like I say, most people just have stripes and that's it. Kind of boring. So I went ahead and got a friend of mine that was an artist that he did the artwork on the dragon. And my wife had not seen it at all. And I brought her down to the paint shop after it was done, and she was just sick. She said, "You ruined that airplane." And so it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Kids love it. They absolutely love the airplane. And I fly a lot of them in what we call a program called Young Eagles. And I've probably flown 75 or 100 kids over the years. And they always want to get their picture taken with it. Well, anyway, after we finished it at the body shop doing the artwork and everything, my friend says, I got a name for it. He says, that's the dragon, and you're the master of it. So that's how it got its name, the Dragon Master. And that was not an intentional thing to start with, but it be what it may, that's what it is. Now, flying internationally, when you go across borders, there's regulations for what they call the number size on your airplane. To cross any of the borders, you have to have 12-inch numbers. And that is a customs requirement. The FAA doesn't require 12-inch. They require 3-inch numbers. And the first time I came back from Mexico, my wife and I were waiting in Calexico for the customs man to come out. And he comes out, and you have to stay with the airplane till they tell you to get out. And he walks out, and he was rather a portly gentleman. And he says, "Where's your end numbers? You're supposed to have 12-inch end numbers." I says, "I do." And I pointed to him, and he looks at him in there, and he goes, "Ho, ho, 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 ho." And that was it. Because the FAA says you have to have contrasting numbers. So that doesn't necessarily contrast real well, but it meets the customs requirement. Those back there meet the FAA requirements. That's why there's two different ones on it. So that's kind of the story behind how the airplane was painted, and it's a little interesting side note on that. There's one other I'm going to add to it. My wife and I were flying back home. We had left Detroit, and we were probably just a little bit south of Chicago. And I'm talking to, I forgot whether it was Chicago Approach or Center. And I got a very unusual request from Center, and they said, "What's your plane like?" I'm at 10,000 feet, and somebody's asked me, "What's my plane like?" Well, we have designations for how they're equipped. And I told him it's a Romeo Victor 6/Golf. And he said, no, what's it look like? And, I looked at my wife and I said, I don't know, what's he mean? He says, "What's it look like?" I says, "Well, it's a gray, low-wing, propeller-driven airplane. And it's got a purple dragon on the side of it." And then all of a sudden I hear him talking to an Airbus coming in above me. And he says to the Airbus driver, he says, "It's a small experimental, it's gray in color with a purple dragon on it." And the guy in the Airbus keys up the mic and says, "Cool." And it was because he was descending in front of me. I could see him out there. It was no problem. And speaking of that, we have an equipment on here called ADS-B. And it's a requirement for all aircraft, civilian, I don't know about the military, but for all airliners, etc., that you have this installed by January 1 of 2020. And it's a great safety feature for a number of reasons. And the primary one is you can see traffic around you. And I will tell you, the first time you install something like that, you're wondering where you didn't know all these airplanes were around you. That's probably the bottom line of the thing. And it's a great feature because it tells you where the traffic is, whether he's high or low in relation to you. And in addition to that, we also get weather on it now. So now we have in-flight weather just like the big boys. So that's kind of the story behind it. And if you want to move in here, I'll show you what the instrument panel looks like. Everybody has their own version of what it should be. And this is probably my fourth iteration on my instrument panel, because originally it had what we call a six-pack or steam gauges in it. That's what we refer to the old round dial stuff. So now it's pretty much all glass panel, and it gives you a tremendous amount of information about flying. And the airplane itself is equipped with autopilot and GPS navigation, fuel consumption, multiple ways of measuring fuel consumption. And like I say, it's got pretty much the equipment that all your large aircraft have, and in many cases, it's got better equipment. With the requirement of having the ADS-B by 2020, January, I have equipped the airplane. Now, it's something that you don't see as a specific instrument, but it gives you indications on here where the traffic is. You can select a screen that will do that. Okay. And this here is what they call an EFIS. It's an electronic flight instrument system. And because we're in the hangar, not outside, it gives you terrain pictures so we can see all the mountains that are out there in front of you. It's another safety factor. And I have multiple backups on the engine instruments there. And it's equipped for night flying. You can fly IFR, which is Instrument Flight Rules, or VFR, Visual Flight Rules. The autopilot here, this is part of what used in an ILS, or Instrument Landing System. This radio is a GPS and a communications. It has a second communications radio. This is our transponder. This is what is used to produce your location for the ADS-B. And this is another engine instrument there. And I have AM, FM radio and satellite radio, so when you're going long distance, you can listen to your music or your favorite news program. Beyond that, it's pretty much a standard instrument cockpit. This is my fourth iteration of an instrument panel. The red lights here indicate whenever a red light comes on, it means you want to pay attention to what's going on because something is not correct. And this one happens to be that my canopy is unlocked, and this one means that the alternator is not charging because naturally the engine isn't running. And the red light down below on all the circuit breakers here and switches is really for night flying. Red does not distort your night vision. That's why they use it. And beyond that, that's pretty much it. Pretty comfortable airplane. Like I say, I've flown it for over 7 hours at a time. At one time, I had built it. I have a quick couple in the cockpit here for a seat tank for being able to go to Hawaii on it. And as I got older, I got less adventuresome, so I've not done that.
Hey, and look at that Dragon Master getting ready for takeoff. Absolutely beautiful. Isn't she great? Wow.
Just a couple of things about the airplane is that you'll notice right up here, there's this black little mount. I have 5 of these, and those are for putting GoPro cameras, and they're just stuck on with tape. And you say, well, how does that stick on when you go 200 miles an hour? Pretty good, because it works. And then one other thing, when you build the aircraft, you have to have a serial number on it. And one of the requirements is you have to have the manufacturer and the model of the aircraft and the serial number on it. And that's what's on it down here. And the manufacturer, in my case, is Hansen. The model is an RH2, because it was my second aircraft, and then the serial number of the airplane. And that's on all aircraft, they have to have that. It's a lovely day, and I can't think of a better thing to do than going flying. And one of the nice things about general aviation like this and small airplanes, you don't have to worry about all this TSA and get to the airport 2 hours early to go through all the security checks. Because you're flying yourself. I tell people, pick anywhere on the West Coast, and we'll leave the house at the same time. You go commercially, and I'll go in this, and I'll beat you there. So it's a fun thing, and it's a very practical thing when you want to get to some place where there is not a major airport. So with that, I'm going to lift up the canopy here, and we'll start the engine up and have a great day of flying.